Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. This week's Game of Thrones bonus video is going to be all about the history of Winterfell and, a little bit about the North. You can't really talk about Winterfell without talking about the rest of the North. Just to start, let's do a recap of where we're at right now and what's been going on at Winterfell since the show has started. Where we are on the show right now, the Boltons have control of Winterfell. Tywin Lannister made Roose Bolton Warden of the North in exchange for his help getting rid of Robb Stark. If you've noticed, they actually have like a little flayed man on top of the 3D model of Winterfell in the opening credits. That's why the flayed man is there, because the Boltons currently control Winterfell. And even though technically they have control of the North politically, that doesn't mean they have the support of the North. Remember that funny scene with Stannis and Jon Snow? Stannis had asked for the support of Bear Island. House Mormont are traditionally bannermen to the Starks. Lyanna Mormont said there is only one king in the North, and his name is Stark. That's a reminder that most of the North still only recognizes House Stark as their true leader. So right now, the Boltons' hold on the North is very precarious. That's what Season 5 is going to deal with, the Boltons trying to hold the North, so it'll be really interesting to see how that goes down. Most people do not know that Sansa is still alive. Like, if Cersei and the Lannisters still knew where she was, they would probably try to hunt her down and kill her. That's why Littlefinger has been protecting her, why she's been living under a false name. She is the true heir of Winterfell right now because, as we saw, Jon Snow did not take Stannis' deal to legitimize him. If he had taken it, most of the North would have rallied around him, but Sansa still would have had a claim, being of more pure blood, so you could have gotten into like a Targaryen Civil War situation, where people argue over the blood rights of succession, but I don't think there's any way Jon Snow would ever fight against one of his family members, so it's a moot point. And if you're still wondering who Lyanna Mormont is, she's the niece of Jeor Mormont, the former Lord Commander, also the niece of Ser Jorah Mormont here. That's where we are on the show right now. There are like eons of history of the North and Winterfell that predate the show that George R. R. Martin hasn't written yet. I know a lot of you are wondering where history on the show comes from. Usually what happens is characters will talk to other characters anecdotally about past events, or you'll see them reading passages out of books. That's usually where most of the ancient history of the show comes from, like Old Nan's stories too, people telling stories to other characters. There is World of Ice and Fire, but that's kind of an offshoot, and it doesn't get like super specific into past events. It just kind of extrapolates based on the stuff that we already know. Most of you have probably heard that Bran the Builder is the one that built Winterfell. He's the same person that's credited with building the wall after the Long Night, but the history of House Stark can be traced all the way back to the High King of the First Men, Garth Greenhand. He's one of the former rulers of the First Men that a lot of people up in the North can trace their lineage to, just like a common ancestor. It's like Genghis Khan. I think it's something like over 50% of the people in China have like some common DNA with Genghis Khan just because he sired so many children. So yes, House Stark can trace their lineage to the High King of the First Men, but so can a lot of other people. For example, one of his sons, Garth the Gardener, went on to found House Gardener. Obviously, we know during Aegon's conquest of Westeros, House Gardener fell and House Tyrell kind of took their place. But the Starks in general just trace their lineage to the First Men, much more so than some of the other houses which trace their lineage more to the Andals, or say like the Martells in the south who trace their lineage to the Rhoynar. The House Starks though, much more than say some of the other great houses of Westeros trace their lineage to the First Men and the Children of the Forest. Most maesters in the Citadel believe, though, that Garth was just like a war chief, like a typical war chief that led people across the Arm of Dorne into Westeros. The First Men migrated to Westeros using the Arm of Dorne. There's a lot of arguments as to who the first official leader of the First Men was. Mostly they just call him the First King. That was about 12,000 years before Aegon's conquest, so there's no promise that George R. R. Martin's ever going to explore this. Moving down the Stark line, it's believed that one of Garth's other sons, Bran the Bloody Blade, was Brandon the Builder's father. The only thing of note that he's really credited with is driving the giants north from the Reach and driving out a lot of the Children of the Forest. There's a lot more that's known about Bran the Builder, but still a lot of the history that was recorded around his time was written by maesters that lived thousands of years after he was alive. So, you could view some of it as conjecture, but generally, he lived towards the end of the Age of Heroes. The Age of Heroes began around the time the First Men signed a peace treaty with the Children of the Forest and they stopped fighting each other. As part of the pact, the Children of the Forest just took to the forests and the First Men kept to the south. Most of the traditions that survive from this time we've seen on the show, like the worshipping of the old gods in the Godswood. That's what the heart trees are for, the weirwoods. Then there's the laws of hospitality. That gets into Red Wedding territory. That just says you're honor bound to take care of people that you bring in and feed. So you invite someone in for a meal, even if they're your bitter enemy, you can't kill them. A lot of you have also probably heard the term Kings of Winter. So that's just the term given to rulers of House Stark, like rulers of the North that predated Aegon's conquest. By that logic, you could call King Torrhen Stark the last King of Winter, because he was the one that bowed to Aegon the Conqueror. That's why there's no Stark blade inside the Iron Throne. Aegon the Conqueror only melted down the blades of people that refused to bend the knee. This is what the Iron Throne is really supposed to look like. You know, the show made it a lot smaller, so you can see there's a lot of people that did not bend the knee. I know there's a lot of confusion about that because they said that all of the former kings of Westeros had their blades melted down, but technically in the books, it's only the kings that did not bend the knee when Aegon asked them to. It was a situation where he was like, you can either bend the knee or I'll melt you with my dragons. So in and around the same time, Brandon the Builder is credited with building the wall, or starting to build the wall. He's also credited with starting to build Winterfell. And like most big castles in real life, it started with a single structure, and then over time, future kings just added to it. There's a lot of lore that's been generated around the specific location of Winterfell. The main structure of the castle is the Great Keep. That's the one that's built on top of hot springs, just, to keep it warm naturally. It's not the oldest surviving part of the castle. The oldest surviving part of the castle is actually the first keep right here, but it's in ruins. As we saw in Season 1, Winterfell is a really big place, so parts of it in ruin. That's one of the big problems with owning a castle, is that you have to pay to keep it up, and it's expensive as hell. The place where Bran witnessed Jaime Cersei twincest is actually the Broken Tower, just a slightly different place, but right near the first keep. Supposedly, the first keep was built around the time the Andals invaded, so this would have obviously been like much later after Brandon the Builder lived. The Andal invasion is somewhere around 2,000 years after the time of Brandon the Builder. Like I said, a lot of this history was recorded by maesters thousands of years after it happened though, so a lot of the dates can be fuzzy. So if the oldest surviving structures at Winterfell only go back to the Andal invasion, then obviously the parts that Brandon the Builder is supposedly built have fallen into disrepair or just were destroyed over time. Technically, the Godswood would be the oldest part, because most of the castle would have been built around that, the original castle. It's most likely that the location for Winterfell was chosen for practical reasons. Like, it's in a relatively central location, and the hot springs help provide a natural source of heat. Old Nan tells a story, though, that there is a sleeping dragon beneath Winterfell, sleeping in the hot springs. So it's totally possible that there's a clutch of dragon eggs beneath Winterfell, but no one's checked to see. I know everyone wants to see more dragons on Game of Thrones. For now, it seems like Daenerys' dragons are going to be the only dragons. Don't worry, dragons can change sexes, so a couple of Daenerys' dragons could swap from male to female, and they could mate with each other. As of right now, unless we find more viable dragon eggs, that's the only way we're getting more dragons. So you start to see like how some of history is problematic, built on legends and theories, and some of the dates are conflicting. Like for instance, the Night's King, supposedly that person we saw at the end of episode 4 from last season. In the history of the series, he was a former Night's Watch Lord's Commander, also supposedly descendant from Bran the Builder. So you could argue that the Night's King has a Stark, or shares some DNA with the Starks. That remains unconfirmed, that's just a theory, but that all predates the Andal invasion. So if there's any surviving part of Winterfell that goes back that far, it's the Godswood. The lineage of House Stark that George R. R. Martin has spelled out, per World of Ice and Fire, only goes back about 8 generations, back to Benjen Stark. That's who Ned Stark's brother, Benjen, is named for, who's still kind of missing in action as of right now. Some of the other really big locations of Winterfell that we have seen, though, include the Great Hall. That's where everyone eats together. There's the Glass Garden, the Crypts. There's the Bell Tower, the Maester's Tower, the Library Tower, and the Guards Hall. There are gates on each side of the castle, but to the south is Wintertown. We haven't spent a whole lot of time there since Season 1, but that's where we first find Tyrion in the whorehouse with Roz. That's right south of Winterfell, right near the south gates. Typically, the population there swells around wintertime, just for practical reasons. Times get rough up in the north during winter, so naturally everyone's gonna condense down and around the main castle. You may have noticed that in the opening credits sequence the last couple of seasons, Winterfell has continued to burn. That's just a reminder of where it's at right now. Like currently it lied broken. The Boltons are slowly rebuilding it though, so it'll probably stop burning in the opening credits soon. As much as it was a bummer that Theon burned most of the place whenever he sacked it back in Season 2, it was actually burned really badly 2 other times, both by rulers of the Dreadfort. It was burned by Royce II and then later by Royce IV, but both of those times predated the Andal invasion. So that's probably why there are no surviving structures from, say, like the time of Bran the Builder, aside from the Godswood. You have to remember that Winterfell has been around for thousands of years, and there have been numerous invasions, numerous wars, so it's no surprise that it was destroyed a couple times throughout history and then rebuilt. So the same thing is going to happen again on the show. So here's my big question for you guys. What part of Winterfell do you really want to see them explore more on the show? For now, it seems like, most of the places we'll see will be practical, like the courtyard, the Great Hall, and then the places associated with lore, the crypts and the Godswood. Those are probably the most important locations of Winterfell anyway, but it would be nice at a certain point to get a better tour of the grounds. That would mean they'd have to spend more money building sets, so maybe in a future season, who knows. Just a reminder that my new Game of Thrones Episode 3 video is going to post tonight after the episode airs. Be sure to subscribe to get it. I'm running a new round of the giveaway. If you're not already, you can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook for updates on, when videos are coming. So there are links for that in the bottom of the description. So in case you guys haven't seen it, you can click here for my Episode 2 video, and you can click here to learn all about the House of Black and White and the Faceless Men. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.